an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 579 through 581. I have skipped the filler episodes that are at the beginning of this arc. In these episodes, Luffy, shocking nobody, decides that he really wants to go to the most dangerous looking island, which is covered in a volcano and lava, and then they find out that there's a whole other area that's all ice and snow, and it's very much giving a Song of Ice and Fire. I am into it, curious about what's going on here, but also, why can't Luffy ever just want to go someplace that looks peaceful and comfortable? Why? For what reason? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Florian for commissioning this episode. I don't think that there's anybody here in the chat today, which is a shame because I really wanted somebody else to appreciate this wild camera work that I've got going on here with my new computer. But you guys, these episodes, it was so weird because it was like I was very engaged for some of it. And then there were a lot of parts that I found myself just getting frustrated. And I turn out to be very wrong about some of that. So that's on me. But it was a weird start to an arc for me. Now, when I say weird start, what I really mean is normally when our friends split up, there is a certain breakdown that I'm used to of who gets to stay and who goes on the adventure, you know? And Luffy and Zoro are the ones that go. So in that respect, it's pretty normal. But I was surprised that Sanji doesn't, Nami also doesn't, that Usopp, like, despite clearly not wanting to go, he's still forced to go. And so the breakdown of the two groups that we end up with winds up being quite different than they usually are. I am really curious about this island, and there's a point where we go over to Tashigi and Smoker, and they're talking about how there is like a particular island, which we find out later is Punk Hazard. I just have to say, y'all, I really like the name Punk Hazard. It's not any like better. I've made the complaint before that the place names in this sometimes don't feel like place names at all. They feel like you just picked some weird words that are technically places, like Ennis Lobby. And I'm like, well, I guess technically there's a lobby that's a place, so you could say that. But I don't, you could make this argument much more effectively with Punk Hazard, because neither Punk nor Hazard has ever described a location, really. But I gotta be honest, something about it works for me. Something about it just sort of like rolls off the tongue. So I'm kind of into it. And there is just this vibe of like we get a distress call, and you guys, the distress call, it's truly hilarious. The transponder snail just starts sobbing, and when I think that it's Zoro maybe who says like, oh, that's a distress signal, and when I realized that's what we were doing, that the distress signal was sobbing, that was very funny to me. So they get a message from somebody who seems to die mid-sentence as he is asking for their help. And he says, we're all so cold. We need boss, I think is what he says. our men are getting cut down one by one, and then he is killed. Well, you know what? This is I can't, you guys, I don't even want to hazard a guess. There is a part of me that really does think it's all these experiment guys. But I can't be fully convinced of that. I feel like there has to be something else going on. So because like the island seems too large for there to only be one enemy that they're dealing with or one variable. Um, the fact that they say our men are getting cut down one by one, that's a specific way to say this, and it doesn't sound like something that these men in hazmat suits would be involved with. So it feels a little bit more like we're talking about the samurai, which that guy is. When we finally sort of put his face together, and really that's an asterisk because it's not put together correctly, and that's quite clear. I cannot decide whether it seems like he's here alone or not. I feel like samurai tend to be loners, traditionally speaking, but either this dude is quite effective all alone and he was taking out the guys that the man in the distress signal was talking about all by himself, or there's more than one of him and he is one of the ones that actually like got caught up and the others are out there still wreaking havoc. And why are they here? And why is any of this happening? And was the person calling for help actually like a fellow pirate? Was he somebody who worked on the island? Like the there are a lot of questions. So I'm gonna back up here and start at the beginning. Um just realized that I didn't read the titles of the episodes in the opening. So 579 is Arriving, A Burning Island, Punk Hazard. Episode 580 is A Battle in the Heat, Luffy versus the Giant Dragon. And then 581 is The Straw Hats Stunned, Enter a Samurai's Horrifying Severed Head. Which, truly, these titles, you guys, just wild stuff. So the weird thing, you guys, is that at the start of this episode, we are like kind of right back where we were. Just full disclosure, I accidentally started watching the filler episodes, and as soon as it began, I was like, hold on, let me double check my thing because I feel like this doesn't sound like what they would want me to be watching right now. And sure enough, they were marked as filler. But I saw that we were like entering a whole different storyline. And so there's this thing that's like in the previously on that is shown to us, and that is Luffy basically turning into a giant. And I wanted to get it out there that I saw this in the previously on because I don't know if this is something that is going to be trotted out later that I'm going to be like, that they're going to treat as if I should have already known that he could do this. But I just wanted to let you guys know if it is meant to be kind of a surprise later, I saw it already. The way the show goes, though, I don't think anybody's going to write it in as a surprise because they're assuming that you have watched the filler episodes. But I just did want to acknowledge that this is a power that's like pretty huge and impressive that I didn't know Luffy could do that gets dropped in a filler, which seems like a weird way to do it. I am used to these major moments being, in the main plot. And I don't know, maybe this is something that he only does for the filler episode and doesn't do again, which would be a sort of weird way to play it. So I don't really think that's likely, but I wanted to mention it. Um, but I say it's weird because like without knowing that there were filler episodes there, without having to manually skip them or seeing the previously on, this episode basically begins exactly where the last one I covered broke off. And so I am really curious how our friends are supposed to have like gone through this whole other adventure that took 4 episodes and then apparently wind up in the same place that they had been, with the lightning and the rushing ocean out in the middle of nowhere. Um, so I may be mistaken, and it may be that they don't wind up in the exact same place, because I don't remember seeing this volcano thing. But we don't get a lot of time to get our bearings. There are whales all around us. It's quite hectic when they wind up surfacing. So I was just sort of curious, like, if anybody has watched the fillers, if there's something that explains how perfectly seamlessly these episodes could have been watched without the fillers in between, and our friends just wind up in the same place. I don't feel like that's how it's functioned in the past. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But anyway, so we wind up here and we see this like fire ring that's a wall of flame circling the island. And it's so funny because it's very like obvious later on, when Smoker and Tashigi are talking. They're describing this island that has been sealed off, and they're expressing some surprise, or at least Tashigi is, that Luffy is even there. And I was listening to this conversation and actually thinking to myself, how is it how do you even seal off an island? How do you do that with something that size? And it didn't even occur to me that we had just seen an island that was nearly impossible to approach. Like, why? How did I not put that together? Y'all, I can really be a dense bitch sometimes, and I'm certain you all know that. If y'all are listening to this show for long enough, there have got to have been moments where you are like, I can't believe we're paying this stupid cunt. What is she saying? This doesn't even, you know what I mean? Like, I am sure. And for that, I apologize. But this is a moment where even I was disgusted with myself. Once we go back to the island, it was a minute before I really put it together. Oh, sealed off. Like, that's how that would work. Putting this permanent barrier, of course. I think it was more like, when you say sealed off, I think of it as like completely encased, which of course, that is one way of sealing something off, but that is not the only way. I was being very limited in my thinking. So anyway, they're in the midst of this wild storm at the time, and there's tons of rain falling, and the weather in this changes up a lot. It was kind of interesting to me because, like, really, when you stop and think about it, our friends have rarely been on their ship in the rain. It's happened a couple times, but it's always kind of like the fact that it's raining, it's part of a storm, it's a whole thing about the weather. And here it really feels almost secondary to everything else that's going on. Like, yes, we are on this, we are approaching this new island. We're in this adventure sort of frame of mind, as we always are on this ship. But the rain isn't a factor like in the plot at all. And I know this is a weird thing to bring up, but I just really liked the look of it. There was something about it that really made everything feel a little different than usual and a little special, because the way that we're used to seeing them on their ship is normally in like absolutely beautiful temperate weather, like we're in the Caribbean or Southern California. You know what I mean? It's almost always bright and sunny and clear, unless there is a very specific reason why not. And so just seeing them actually experiencing some real weather here as a sidebar, I sort of liked it and didn't realize how much I was missing that as an overall factor until I saw it. Um, so they're approaching this, and like, Nami is really set on the fact that they should not be heading in this direction. Of course, there is a fucking volcano. You don't want to be like, if we were talking about real life, this would indeed not be where we want to go. But Luffy, as, the guy who always wants to pick the most difficult means of doing anything, insists on it. And genuinely, I believe, cannot see any reason why you wouldn't want to do the most interesting thing. Um, so they're heading towards the fire, and understandably, some folks are like, "Hey, aren't we going to catch fire?" And Frankie says, "Absolutely not. Don't underestimate the Sunny." And he turns out to be quite right about this. Um, all of the fish around the island are already dead. Nami points out that they are bones, and Brooke is basically like, and what's wrong with that? I did think that was actually very funny because the fact that they are all bones, it's there is something wrong with that, Brooke. I think that you should understand actually that there is something wrong with that because you know that you being all bones, there's something kind of wrong with that as well. Like this isn't normal. Um, and this is when they get interrupted by the transponder snail. It turns out that Robin, she says more than half of the distress calls are actually fakes and traps set up by the Marines. That is bananas. Like, more than half? Really? I was so confused by this. So, I the way that I kept thinking of this was like they're doing this because they're trying to catch pirates. And if they're trying to catch pirates, why would they like share the fact that they are in trouble as a means of luring them? Because that implies that pirates would try to come and help, which means that pirates are not like terrible people. And I didn't even consider the fact that plenty of pirates functioned this way. They would see ships that were foundering and they would take advantage. They would come not because they were trying to help at all, but because they were like, "Oh, you're in trouble. Why don't we just ease up this burden of all this stuff you're carrying and either take you as slaves or kill you or who knows what." So I felt extremely naive for a moment as I realized like, oh, obviously. Um, so the way that this is like set up, we have a weird kind of I'm gonna back up so I can read the actual dialogue here. Robin is the one who says maybe he was just acting and this is a trap because the guy sounded genuinely distressed, but she's not fully willing to admit it. And oh right, he said something about the samurai in the distress call. So I'm over here theorizing if that's who it is, but he flat out said it. And if he said the samurai, I feel like it must be a singular, but samurai I think is plural, right? Like it can be either, like deer. So there's still maybe more than one, but I kind of feel like there's not. Um, and this is when Zorro is asking, like, Brooke, that's a swordsman, right? Like, and he says, yeah, they're from a faraway land, an island known as the Kingdom of Wano. And that's in the dub. When he says this, the camera shows us a couple of characters and translation of wa, W-A only. And so that made me question whether or not this was different in the original, like if the subtitles say something different and just maybe say wa, or if Wano, I know that there are sort of like, um, what do you call it? Not prefixes. I want to say postfix, suffix, um, in Japanese that are meant to get like not necessarily a title across, but sometimes like a term of endearment or just meant to imply like how well you know somebody. So I wondered if Wano was like meant to be taking this word and adding a suffix to it because I'm not familiar with them. You know, I was going to say I'm not familiar with most of them. I'm really not familiar with almost any of them. The only one that I know really is San, which I think is an endearment, right? So anyway, Wano is closed off from the rest of the world, so most people know little about it. It's not even affiliated with the world government. They say that their samurai are so formidable that even the Navy dares not challenge them. And as he says this, Zoro is looking at his sword hilt, and we get the flashback to him fighting with that ghost, that samurai ghost in Killer Bark, which I had totally forgotten about, that this sword is a gift from him after Zoro defeated him. Um, and he says, this body of legendary samurai, how shameful of me to allow it to know defeat. He's talking about the sword, I believe. Uh, so yeah, Zoro was just like really thinking hard about this. Um, and Frankie is like, all right, you're talking about this place where all the samurai are from, but this guy said that he was on Punk Hazard. So clearly that's not what we're dealing with. Do you think that that is the island right there? And it doesn't seem like there's anywhere else close enough that the transponder snail could have reached them other than this island. So that's got to be where he is. And Luffy, of course, had already wanted to go to our fire island here. And so now that he has somebody to rescue, it's just a foregone conclusion. Of course, they're going to be doing this, despite the fact that nobody else wants to go. It's like, I say nobody, almost nobody. Mostly, no, like the only person that is excited is Luffy. The people who are protesting seem to be Nami, Chopper, and Usopp, and we don't really get an opinion either way from anyone else. Um, I wanted to mention to you guys, because this has been something that's sort of like, it's been getting more and more overt, if that's the word I want, but there is a real kind of Krusty the Clown sound to Luffy's laugh lately that I like. There's always been a touch of it, but it feels like it's really getting extreme. And I was just taken aback in these episodes how long it goes on, some of the laughter and the like similarity to Krusty the Clown here and there. I was just sort of like, this is almost copyright infringement, even though, it's a clearly very different voice. But it's just been slowly growing and growing. And this episode was the one where I was like, good God, it's just really going on quite a long time. His laughs last a while. So this is when we go over to Tashigi and Smoker, and they decide that they're going to change course and head over to Punk Island. And she says that, didn't they seal it off after that incident a few years ago? I don't even remember if she says exactly how much time. I kind of want to check now and see if she says like a specific 10 years or something like that. Let's see. After the incident 4 years ago, they sealed off the entire island. So 4 years ago, well before our friends separated and leveled up. And Smoker admits, I really don't think that anybody would go there and be able to survive. However, if it turns out that's where they did go and we don't follow up on it, we're going to be screwed. So we have to at least check it out, which is fair, I'm all for covering bases. I think that's just the smart way to go. So we then see that there is this pirate captain that is being strung up. They're burning this dude alive. It feels for me like this is not the way the Marines usually work. I'm a little bit confused, you guys. I didn't think that this is the sort of like execution that Smoker would normally go for. I almost called him Chopper. Did you hear that? what I mean is, I absolutely understand that this man is for capital punishment. We saw that he was about to execute Luffy, and, that's not surprising. But burning alive is a really particularly cruel way to execute. And it's like the combination of that they're doing that and that they're on a ship when they're doing it, which feels extra, extra dangerous to me. I just don't really get why they're handling this guy this way. It's like maybe they're just torturing him and it's not meant to be a killer. Like maybe they're not doing an execution. Maybe they're just like trying to get information out of him. But I don't know. It really seemed like they were about to outright kill him. So what's going on here, y'all? I'm really curious about whether or not I just misjudged Smoker or if this is an indication that he has changed as a character since we last saw him. Um, so this is the point where our friends draw straws and decide who is going to be going on the island versus who stays here. And Usopp winds up getting to go. He makes a big show about how he's going to be tough and, draw one of the straws. And when he sees that it signals he has been chosen to go, his tough guy act just completely falls apart. So they take the mini Mary. Nami sets them up to ride a sort of trail that she makes out of cloud, which is a pretty fun development. I do enjoy that she has this ability. This is something that's like really practically useful. And, I kind of had issues about the fact that it seemed Nami was never really allowed to fight. I was just I was a little fatigued by the fact that no matter how many abilities she developed, she's never really at the center of the fighting ever. And I kind of just wanted to see it like a couple times, And so this, even though it's not necessarily like for fighting, I was very into how practical this could be for her to assist others with fighting, getting to a certain place. Um, just the breaking out like slowly of new abilities for each of my like characters here, where we don't get a dossier of everything that they are now capable of. It's sort of trickling out as we continue with the story. I really, really enjoy all of these little surprises. I like seeing it in the moment with the context of however they're managing to use it. And it's just, I have felt like the last episodes in the last arc, it was a setup for us to get to see what they're capable of. And it definitely was, but that isn't all that they're capable of that's brand new. So we've got more to look forward to on that front. So let's see. It's Zoro, Robin, Usopp, and Luffy who are heading to the island. And for whatever reason, everybody has decided that on their little ride over, they're going to go ahead and eat their lunches that were packed by Sanji, which I did think was very funny. Like, as soon as Sanji puts Luffy in custody of the food, I was sort of like, that seems like a huge mistake, but okay. But seeing that everybody else goes along with it as well, and it's just like, yeah, let's just eat our lunch, except for Usopp, who keeps being like, what are you guys doing? I did find this funny and also really appropriate because if you're like taking a little ride somewhere, like if you're on a train, having a little snack, like I think that would be a lot of our instinct is to just, especially in a universe where you don't have a cell phone to disappear into or something. Yeah, you're just going to sort of be like, oh, let me just have this little sneaky snack to keep myself occupied. And then later on, despite the fact that Usopp claims I'm just saving it for later, he starts eating out of emotion. And so he is like stuffing his face as things get more and more stressful. And I found that actually genuinely funny because I thought that there might be something that was more fat phobic that they were going to do again because the whole thing with him getting fat in the on the island that he was on. I was like, are we going to be bringing that up again? Is this going to be a whole thing? But no. And I was kind of relieved, although it may still be something that gets trotted out later as well. Who knows? Um, so, so yeah, anyway, this little snack bit, I just thought that this was funny. So they see the front gates, Punk Hazard, keep out by order of the Marines, the world government, yada, yada. And when they just decide they're going to go in anyway, Usopp is like, you don't want to get on the bad side of the world government, do you? And then he's like, oh, we've already done that. And then he says something like, um, I can't remember. There was another thing as well. And he's like, oh, we did that too. And I did actually think that this was a good bit. Eventually, he just tries to be like, yeah, but from like an ethical perspective, we probably shouldn't be going in. And the fact that he just sort of brings it down to an ethical perspective, it's just so weak. Bless him. So they go on inside, and this is when they come up against this dragon. And y'all, I will tell you what. This is when I said in the intro or beginning of this episode that there were some things I was wrong about. I was so irritated that our friends didn't try to talk to this dragon. I was so mad because like this dragon is actually animated to be pretty cute. It does not look like a vicious creature the way that the Sea Kings look. It's not as dopey and friendly as some of the other, like the little shark in the t-shirt or anything like that. But he had a look to him that was kind of, in a way, non-threatening. And I say in a way because even though it was, he did sort of look intimidating. It wasn't the kind of intimidating that I'm used to in this show when it comes to characters that are worthy of just outright execution, which is what happens to this dragon. And so the fact that he starts to talk, but nobody really seems to make an effort to speak with him. And even though more than one person hears him eventually, they're all just like, oh yeah, that's weird. And then they keep trying to kill him. I was kind of disgusted. I was kind of fucked up over it. I was like, y'all are jumping to all these conclusions about this dragon. You don't know if any of this is correct. Like, how I was very in my feelings, and I felt as like so certain that at any moment the dragon would speak again and be like, why are you doing this? And then as the scene progresses and he just speaks weirdly intermittently and the things he says don't really feel like they make sense, I started to be like, maybe not. Maybe that's not what we're doing. And then finally, Luffy sees the legs sticking out of him. And at that point, I was like, is it possible that this is just like a misunderstanding and that this dragon is coming at them the way that he is because he has some weird thing going on with a human like stuck in his back and he's cranky. And once they yank this guy out, the dragon will be like, oh, thank God, that was agonizing. Thanks for helping. Something like that. And no, the dragon is, as they believe, purely an enemy. I was so disappointed. I'm not even going to play with y'all. I really wanted this dragon to be a bud. I wanted this dragon to be somebody who like wound up, if not necessarily becoming part of the crew, was just sort of an ally that they, made here somehow. I really had a whole mental picture, and I was devastated when it's literally killing and eating him. That's what we did. He he was adorable, and he's a dragon. And they were all so blown away to see one after they thought they were only myth, and then to just instantly just kill it. I was I was so disappointed, y'all. I was truly devastated about it. So anyway, I just wanted to share that because I held on to the hope that we were going to have a dragon friend for like longer than was really reasonable. And eventually, Luffy pulls the legs out of the back of the dragon and it's just legs. So at that point, I had the probably like, I'm not alone in this, the thought, is it possible that this is uh Buggy the Clown? Because he has like sort of stripy pants with like a sash around his waist that it's not unthinkable Buggy would wear this outfit from, the waist down. It turns out this is not what's happening. It's a whole other thing. But genuinely, I was thinking, well, it has to be. How could this be otherwise? Well, how this can be is due to this weird experimentation that they are evidently doing on this island. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, so I'm going to keep backing up. But once Luffy gets the legs out of the dragon, he is so excited at the prospect of this weird thing with the legs. And he also mentions, like, you guys work with the 7 warlords. And from the way he says it, to me, it sounds like he is an enemy of the warlords. He's trying to make sure that they are enemies first before striking. And so he's asking in order to confirm what he already suspects. But Luffy wants to make him a crew member and starts chasing him. And because he doesn't have a head, he can't see Luffy and he can't really communicate that well. He's still able to sort of talk, but it's just everything is very unclear and like riddled with misunderstanding. And Luffy eventually like gets stuck to him in such a setup that he looks like a centaur, like he's got 4 legs. It was such a goofy thing to do, and it was genuinely quite funny. I actually really liked this. So uh the legs, let's see. Oh, he doesn't have pants. It's like a skirt. My bad. But when you first see him, when he first gets detached, it's not totally clear that's what's going on. But yeah, so Luffy, when he gets back together with his friends and he's just like, I don't know how this happened, but I think it's kind of awesome. So we're just going to stay like this for now, I guess. So he and his friends keep going forward and they finally come to this like cliff's edge where they are able to look out over the side of the island facing toward it. I think it's like a sort of curved in bay. And so they're looking from maybe one side of it, or maybe it's a lake. Maybe they say it's a lake, but either way, on the other side, it's straight up frozen. It goes from so hot that we see actual rock melting in some places to so freezing that we've got straight up icebergs just like floating around. And I thought Usopp made a pretty good point here because when they're talking about crossing and seeing what's going on in the snowy section, Usopp is like, look, no, here I can avoid the fire and I'm still fine. But there, the fucking snow, it is like just a symptom of the cold, and there won't be any escaping that kind of cold. So no, I don't want to go over there. And as somebody who personally, this is something that's always bothered me. People will talk about how, logically speaking, being too cold is not as bad as being too hot. Because if you're too cold, you always have the option of putting on more clothing in order to retain your heat. If you are too hot, there comes a point when you're just naked and there's nothing more to be done. And I totally understand how logically that may make sense. But for me, cold can actually feel painful. Heat is unpleasant. It makes you sweat. It makes you feel slimy. It makes you feel like sluggish and tired. All of that is true. But cold like hurts your body in a way that like it doesn't even have to be that cold out for it to begin to happen. The circumstances just have to be right. And heat has to be so much more extreme before, like the one thing that I could say is that sunburn is a thing, and that's not even really heat related. You can get sunburned in the winter just as easily as in the summer. As long as you are in direct sunlight and you are not protected, you could have this happen at any time. So anyway, I am very much kind of team Usopp on this because I understand the idea of how you could technically protect yourself from cold more continually as the situation escalates than you can from heat. But just the experience of being cold for me is so much more unpleasant and painful, and it like robs my concentration. It's just, I fucking hate being cold so much. So anyway, I just wanted to mention this because I thought that his reaction was completely reasonable. So I'm gonna also mention, I think that I in my memory thought that they reached this a little later, but I actually, thinking back, I believe they got to this right away when they entered Punk Hazard. That they come to this spot where they can see over the sort of area that has been destroyed. And I thought it was, this is the sort of thing where it's like, you're saying that this is obvious. It's not obvious, but I think you're telling us it's obvious just so that we know, because you are aware that it's not obvious. But they come to this viewpoint and they are looking out over all of these buildings that are burnt and melted. And Robin says, well, they're not houses. Must be like, or she says, obviously it's some kind of government, like science facility. And I was like, it's really not obvious at all. What do you mean? But eventually we start to see some of what might still be going on here. So first, on the ship, our friends are hanging out. Sanji has made everybody some like ice creams to cool them down. And he goes back into the kitchen, and the rest of our friends are out on the deck enjoying themselves, trying to like deal with this heat. I kept thinking that it might be better to go inside the ship, but I'm operating under this assumption that it has AC. Honestly, with everything that Frankie can do, it should have AC, but it's fine. And all of a sudden, you see these like hands clamp on the sides of the deck, and somebody hauls themselves up over the railing on the side. And I thought that this was going to be Wet Hair Caribou, because I said in the last episode that we don't actually really see what happens to him. So it's possible that he could have stowed away somewhere on the Sunny and is biding his time before he appears. The longer this goes on without seeing him, the less likely I think that is, but I'm not willing to completely let it go because it was just left so open-ended, it felt to me. But it turns out that it's these other weird guys in these, they're hazmat suits, but instead of having the sort of square, large screen on the front of the face that you can see somebody's whole face through, they have these little portholes in like the center around their eyes that makes them look a lot more alien-like. I think that these are all ordinary people, but the suits just are bonkers looking. And they come on deck and they release some kind of weird gas that sends all of the pirates to sleep. And Sanji is unaffected because he is inside at the stove, like making some more food. He comes out and he finds everybody passed out, and he has inhaled some of the smoke. So he gets a little bit frustrated with himself because he didn't notice it right away. And I was thinking that maybe he would be able to save them all, but he winds up getting captured along with the rest of them anyway. So they wake up and they are inside this very stark white, like, laboratory room. And there is a dude who is basically all flame. It's hard to say what he is. According to this subtitle, his name is Caesar Clown. That is not a good name at all. That's terrible, actually. But I guess. I was actually like wondering, because of this place being called Punk Hazard, that perhaps this dude was Vegapunk and that like we were seeing what he had wound up doing to himself, that he had made so much forward momentum with the dramatic like robotics and stuff that he was doing that now he straight up just doesn't even need a body anymore, which I think is kind of a fun idea. But that is not what's happening here, I don't think. If he's being called Caesar Clown, either Vegapunk has decided to go with a different nomenclature based on his new identity and his weird bodiless existence, or this is just an entirely different character, and I think that's probably more likely. So the Caesar Clown, I really don't like it, guys. I just don't like that at all. He is looking over all of the straw hats that have been captured, and he's getting pretty excited because to him, this is like, you guys got some real weirdos here, you know? We've got this little like pet that apparently can talk. This dude that we thought was dead because he's just a skeleton, he's actually up and walking around. We have a cyborg as well in the mix. Like, this is a very rare grouping of people that makes it much more interesting than the usual folks they come across, evidently. So I don't know what it is they're planning on doing. He says something vague like, we'll have fun with them later, something very sinister sounding like that. And I just wanted to say, um, this is just from speaking for myself. I I think that in the past I have already mentioned to y'all how truly distressing I find storylines about experimentation on people. Any sort of like medical, surgical, uh, especially people who are not volunteering, but even when they are volunteering, it's still really difficult for me. It gives me the heebie jeebies in such a deep, profound, soul level way that my mother would probably say that was something that I suffered from in a past life somehow, you know? And it's very difficult sometimes for me to come to terms with the fact that practically all medical like knowledge and forward motion is due to experimentation, and like a lot of it was involuntary and done on people who didn't have the social power to resist. But this sort of thing, like, I am just so skeeved out by, and I'm really hoping that we don't go to places in this plot line that are going to bother me too much. Fingers crossed. But they're in this room being observed through the glass. And eventually, when they wake up, obviously, Sanji is out here kicking the fuck out of the walls, trying to see if he can break some things down. The first one to wake up is Brooke, because I think he doesn't have blood or tissue, so he overcomes the sleeping gas much more quickly. But I was surprised that it worked on him at all. And then they, who is it that they're talking to? Oh yeah, they're talking to each other about who could have put them in here. Chopper is convinced that it's like vampires. Um, and let's see, I'm trying to find, oh, here it is. Here it is. Yeah, it's the samurai who says it's because he doesn't have any blood. And they say, show yourself. And they turn around and I can't, his name, I think, is saying Kinemon on the subtitle. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, though. I don't know if they actually have used his name in the dialogue yet. They may have. I think at the very end they have, but I just don't remember how it's pronounced. Um, and there are all of these pieces of a face on the ground. His mouth, each eye, nose, chin, top of head, all of it is separated from one another. And they are cut in like these perfect little cubes. And like obviously this guy doesn't have a body in here. It's just his head. So he can't move and he can't put himself back together. So he asks the Straw Hats to use it, to do it, to put it back together. And we get a little sequence of them reassembling his head very incorrectly. And eventually they get to a place where things are close enough that he's just like, you know what? Fine. His chin is upside down on the top of his head, but he's like, this is good enough, whatever. Um, and until they like fully put him back together, they don't seem to register that he's a severed head. But then Sanji points it out and they all get scared again. Um, and he says, a swordsman cut me into many pieces. That villain used some manner of sorcery. He severed my limbs, but I did not bleed. I did not die. I was denied a warrior's death. Instead, I suffered this indignity. I'm a disgrace. And I really felt bad for him because, like, sometimes in stories when somebody is like, well, this is an indignity, I am just like, oh, get over yourself. I have no patience for it. But this man has been cut into so many pieces that his legs are just straight up sticking out of the dragon's back with his like feet waving in the air. And if he hadn't had any underwear on, God knows. The whole vibe of this with his like face being cut into parts. Yeah, he's right. This is an indignity. This is like, I would be very, very upset by it as well. So, um, we go back to Chopper or Usopp, Robin, Zoro, and Luffy. And Luffy has just really gotten obsessed with the idea of going to the snowy side and making snow cones. I love that he says, I scream, you scream, snow cones. Like he was on track for a certain kind of was it colloquialism that I want? But he just completely veers off to the side. And I always kind of like that joke when it's just very unexpected. It's like there's a point in Golden Girls where Rose says that the term that is usually said is um the more, oh god, now I've forgotten it, the lies we weave, the more we practice to deceive, something like that. Anyway, she gets it completely wrong, and every time I get to that part I laugh as if it's the first time because it's so unexpected. You think you know what she's going to say. So when Luffy did that here, I scream, you scream, snow cones. I was just like, never change, buddy. So he is walking towards that side when all of a sudden somebody comes out of nowhere and tries to bash him with like a spiked mace. And he's like, what the fuck? Who is this? And the person who it's, I think, Hyotoros? I don't know if I'm saying that right either. He is like, oh, I'm your worst nightmare, intruder. And he's laughing and ready to fight. And then the smoke clears. And he sees that Luffy also has 4 legs. And is very excited, apparently, to meet somebody else who is like him. Now, I don't know if this guy is the result of an experimentation or if he is a straight up centaur, like, from mythology or what. But evidently, it's good that Luffy got stuck to this guy's legs because it is the thing that saved his life. And I love that this dude says, well, it's nice that your legs have pants. What kind are they? And Luffy's just like, I really don't know. His legs start talking without him. I thought I was cool when I got a muscle shirt to match my legs, but I've never seen talking legs before. Oh, this is so goofy. And his friends are looking down, and Zoro says, "Oh, great. Now he's going to ask that freak show to join the crew," which hadn't occurred to me, but it makes a lot of sense why everybody would be assuming that. So we back up even further, and we see somebody looking through like binoculars at all of them and making a count of how many there are. And he says 4 intruders, and he makes a call. And earlier, there had been a moment where Usopp saw a weird, like, it almost looked like a harpy, a woman with like, she's got a woman's head, but apparently like bird's wings, or potentially like a siren. And she disappears, and nobody else seems to have seen her except Usopp. So this person makes a call. The call gets picked up by a dude who says, "Yeah, they're right here. I got all 4 in my sights." And then a response from the woman, I think it's the same woman because she's got that bright green hair, and she says, "I'll take care of them. Don't worry about it." And she says, "You have fun with that," and licks her lips. Oh, he says he'll take care of them. I thought she was saying it, but no, it's him that says that. But she licks her lips, and I was thinking for a moment that she was going to eat them. But then she says, "Call me back when you're done." So she's not going to have anything to do with this, evidently. And she is heading into the snowy area. And just sort of, doing God knows what. But she seems very entertained by this whole thing. I don't know why she wants them dead. I don't know what's happening here. But that is the end of the episode, is just seeing her flying over the mountains. So, yeah, I enjoyed that. I thought that was a real weird trio of episodes. They've got my attention. I don't know what's coming here, so I will be extremely interested to see. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Appreciate you all. Thank you, Florian, for commissioning this one. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.